Throughout recorded history, and probably even before, there have been those among us who heal, who cure our ills, who soothe our pains, who care for our well-being. During every age, healers have worked in many ways. They have employed fantastic tools. They have drawn on nature. Some have turned inwardly to our spiritual world. But all healers share common ground. They have a passion for life, a dedication for serving, and a deep understanding of the universe around us. Hello, I'm Bob Roundtree. As a practicing physician, I also am committed to healing others. My training is in the kind of medicine commonplace in America, yet this is not the only approach to healing that is met with success. In the history of humanity, there have been hundreds of approaches. But this series is not about history, it's about today. It's about the accumulated knowledge of a broad range of healers who, in their various ways, help to make us better physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The Healers is about alternatives, different ways of thinking and perceiving our world in all its variety. We will explore not fantasy, but fact. Our journey will take us to healers in different cultures around the world, from high-tech medical practices to ancient curative powers we have yet to fully understand. In each episode, we will study a particular facet of healing. We will talk with healers and those who have been healed, and we will watch in wonder and awe at what they can accomplish. Come with us now as we enter the extraordinary world of the healers. Have you ever heard it said that someone has an aura about them? Some might refer to the aura as the field of energy that surrounds the body. Others might simply call it charisma. It may explain why we tend to be drawn to some people and put off by others. Maybe when your cat just sits there and stares at you, Tabby is seeing something you don't. This aura may be very real indeed.
I went to Sunday school like the rest of the kids, you know, and I remember when I was little, I loved that song, Jesus Wants Me for a Sunbeam. And one day I was sitting in Sunday school on my little chair, and the window was open and the sunlight was coming in. I never could make a correlation to what a sunbeam for Jesus was. And that day, the light come in and I saw the beam, and then I thought, oh, that's a sunbeam. And that's what he wants me to be. He wants me to be a light like that.
Ella Vivian Power is a healer, drawn by her concern for people to explore the aura in a new approach to healing.
Well, I eventually joined a church with my dad and mother. And my dad and mother both taught Sunday school. And I studied the Bible. And I learned a lot about the Bible. But a lot of the religious teachings didn't make any logical sense to me whatsoever. I couldn't understand why, if God is love, a child would come in blind or crippled. And I couldn't understand the difference between myself and that. Why was I so fortunate?
In time, Ella Vivian's questions led her to the exploration of healing techniques originated thousands of years ago by early civilizations. Since 1945, she has researched and studied the aura and developed a deep understanding of how it affects us all. The concept of an aura, or of the body consisting of energy fields, is the basis for energy medicine. The centuries-old Chinese practice of acupuncture is one form of energy medicine. Acupuncture points are said to be located within meridians of energy within the body, somewhat like our image of the body's nervous system. Aura balancing is the science or art or practice of focusing on the aura surrounding an individual and using it as a tool for healing. Those who use the aura to heal say it gives them a sort of four-dimensional image of a person, the three dimensions we're used to, as well as a dimension of time, giving a history of a person's life experience. The aura might be explained scientifically as an electromagnetic or biomagnetic field that extends some distance around our physical being. Some say it can be thought of as a blueprint that forms our inner body, that then provides access to our inner being. But whatever it might be, there's strong evidence that an aura exists around each of us. How do we know? Because it seems that some people can actually see the aura. They can touch it, feel it, understand it, and use it to heal our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. Indeed, aura balancing seems to have provided astonishing cures for people around the world. In the next hour, let's take a closer look at the very real practice of auric healing, an act of balance. To find out about this technique and philosophy, our researcher, Mark Hochwender, talked with some authorities and pioneers in alternative approaches to today's Western medical practices. So Mark, where did you start your investigation?
The first person I spoke with was Dr. Ron Hulnick of the University of Santa Monica. This university in California is an experientially based university specializing in applied psychology. Ron has dedicated his life to helping people understand what it is that helps make us healthy. What's your definition of health, Ron?
To define healing not so much in terms of physical symptoms, but in terms of well-being, I would have to say, on all levels. So physical, mental, emotional, spiritual as well. From a medical point of view, of course, we would talk about the well-being of the physical body. From a psychological point of view, we would talk about mental clarity, and we would talk about emotional maturity and emotional stability. But more and more, I like to think of the work that Dr. Dean Ornish in San Francisco is doing with, I guess the word he's calling it psychocardioimmunology or something like that. But he started out with the idea that if you begin with people who have heart disease, veins and arteries filled up with cholesterol or plaque to a certain degree, could you reverse the trend, literally have like a Drano effect of cleaning that out by doing things such as practicing techniques designed to relieve stress, like yogic techniques, nutrition, meditation.
The studies conducted by Dr. Dean Ornish and documented in his book scientifically support the idea that the effects of heart disease could indeed be reversed through techniques that not only address lifestyle and physical activity, but also the patient's state of mind. Dr. Ornish's research was paralleled by the work of Carl and Stephanie Simonton, a cancer specialist and a psychotherapist. Their treatment encourages cancer patients to actively participate in their care and recovery through their own positive mental attitudes.
He would tell you that bypass surgery, he thinks, is a metaphor for the condition that this country is in. We've largely bypassed the heart, the function of the heart. Well, there's the physical function of the heart, but then there's the psychological or spiritual function of the heart. Now you could see, if one holds that position, it changes the whole definition of what health and healing is all about. And a lot of people, maybe the pioneers in this were the Simontons with their cancer work, they stopped defining healing as the remission of cancer symptoms. And they started defining healing as the degree to which a person enhanced the quality of their life as a result of their work. So the emphasis away from physical alleviation of symptoms, more toward healing the life rather than the physical symptom.
The first ways of healing were energy.
Robert Waterman is the president of Southwestern College in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Mark went to Southwestern to learn more about Robert Waterman's pursuit of the idea of healing the life, not just the physical symptom. Southwestern College was originally named Quimby College in honor of Phineas Quimby, a 19th century thinker who fostered a link between natural internal powers and the ability to heal. He recognized that this was an integration of philosophy with science, and aptly named his approach the science of the Christ. But it was a philosophy of healing, not religion. Mark learned about the very unusual experience that brought Quimby's philosophy into being.
You mentioned auric healing, energetic healing. Is there a history to this?
There's this Phineas Parker's Quimby. Had this unusual experience where he was following all the prescription of how one had, they call it a consumption, or I guess it's TB, how you're supposed to take care of yourself, which is take it easy, get fresh air.
And you know, they didn't have any cure for it back in those days, and they would tell their patients to go out in the sun, get air. So one afternoon, every afternoon, he took a ride with his horses in his carriage, and that afternoon, while he was climbed up in the carriage, had the reins in his hand, and something spooked the horses.
His horse bolted, and by the time he brought it back into control, his TB was gone.
And when he got them calmed down and climbed up into the carriage, he was healed. He didn't have any more TB.
So, being a curious person, he wondered, well, what's that all about?
And one of the things was that he was not conscious of himself when that healing took place. That he was so mentally involved with stopping the horses. And in that interim, when he was so concentrated outside of himself, the healing happened.
And so he looked into mesmerism and looked into a number of things, and eventually he developed what he called the science of the Christ, which was there's a natural energy form of healing inside. He called it the Christ, inner Christ, and that if it isn't blocked and has free expression into your life, you're pretty healthy and balanced and handle most things well. And that if you had created beliefs or thoughts that blocked that flow, you'd get sick.
And this is the bottom line of what he decided. That man was created perfect. And at the end of God's creation, he was called good. And if man was not manifesting his perfection, it was because he had accepted a concept that was contrary to truth. And that if that could be brought from his subconscious mind to his conscious mind and be forgiven, that energy could be released and he would be healed.
The healing process is one of creating environments, situations, and philosophies and approaches that support people in getting in touch with the places inside that hurt so that they can release them.
Illness, whether physical or mental, may very well be a manifestation of larger imbalances of the body, mind, or even spirit. If so, the process of healing requires that we look beyond the symptoms of illness itself and into our inner being, into ourselves.
I would say to you that if you heal an illness and you don't heal the things that produced it in the first place psychologically, it will either reemerge later on down the road or some other illness will emerge to take its place. I'm actually saying there's causality here.
During that time, I became very ill and was taken to the hospital. And I spent about 60 days in a Taos hospital with this disease, according to the doctors. I was in and out of consciousness. I had fevers up to 108 degrees.
About 20 years ago, Billy Whalen was living life on the wild side. He developed a set of symptoms that defied diagnosis, a disease which medical doctors simply could not identify. He was dying. It was at that time that he met Ella Vivian Power, and his life would never be the same again.
Now I want to understand. So you've got this fever, you're dying. What did you think at that point?
I come from a lot of abuse as a child. Physical, sexual, horror stories. A lot of guilt, a lot of lack of self-worth, no good, don't deserve to live, bad person. And when the doctor finally admitted that there was nothing medical science could do for me, I was dying, I mean, I felt great about that. You know how people don't want to die and all? I said, this is cool. I thought it was great. So they carried me to the car. I couldn't walk. I just, you know, I looked like a hockey stick with hair, right? And then the next day come turn for me to get an aura balancing, which I didn't know what that was yet. So I go over to the Quimby Center. I'm carried over there, and I'm in a living room with about 15 people, and Ella Vivian Power comes out. And apparently she's the woman who's going to work with me, the person who's going to work with me. And we're talking, you know, and I'm dying, you know, I'm dying. And she's, at one point, she says to me in a very loving, motherly way, she says, Billy, don't you want to live? And I said, I don't know. And she screamed at me, and I won't scream this loud, man, it'll blow you away, but she screamed at me then, get out! So I thought she meant get out of the house, you know, I'm dying right now. And she didn't mean it. What she meant, I found out later, was that, you know, I mean, you have life, man. If you don't want to live, then get the hell out and let somebody else that wants to. That was the essence of what she was saying to me. I think she was also setting me up, too, because she really got my attention.
Healing to me is helping a person use their situation to get larger inside. So as a artifact of that, they feel better physically, they feel better emotionally, they feel better psychologically. Those kind of things happen, but not as the goal.
Can you tell me why you came?
To you?
Uh-huh.
I was dying.
And I said, if you want to die, you know how to do that.
Yeah, not here.
And so you need to make up your mind if you want to live. And if you want to live, I'll do everything in my power to assist you in your choice.
They schlepped me back to a balance room and they put me on this table. It's really weird, you know. And she was the main person, and then there were a bunch of people, I guess they were called light bearers. They were going to hold the light for me. I mean, I don't know what the hell they were talking about. There was no flashlights in it.
Right.
And she started working with me with a crystal pendulum, swinging it around my body. First, she did a prayer. And I don't remember verbatim, but she called on the Holy Spirit, she called on the Christ, you know, Mo and Larry. And she starts working with this pendulum with me.
I went in and I opened the aura.
Open the aura?
Mm-hmm. I used my crystal pendulum to open the aura right over your heart. Mm-hmm. It's where your universal connection is. And I begin to ask you questions about how you had arrived at this state of ill health.
So, the aura balancer believes there is a way to tap into our inner being, to get inside of ourselves through this force called the aura. But what exactly is the aura? Can we see it or feel it, touch it? Where is it? Mark posed these questions to Robert Waterman.
See, the aura just means energy. I mean, the word translates to energy. Like the aurora borealis, or you know, the glow around a high-powered line. It's just, aura just means energy. So when you're talking about the aura, you're talking about the life force that constitutes a person. We could probably relate to a nerve having a field of energy around it, calling that an aura. Or the heat coming off a body would also be an aura. In other words, it's a result of that life being there. What we're not as attuned to or comfortable with or common with is that all of the person is energy, and all of it has an energy that is involved with it. So when we talk about an individual identity, another way of saying that same term is there's an energy form that's coherent, has integrity, and has identity in itself. So it's a form of energy.
LightVision, what is the aura, and what's its place in this work that you do with people?
Well, everything that's lived or has lived has an electromagnetic field, and that's a scientific fact. And that electromagnetic field reflects from and radiates from everything. And from a human being, they call it an aura.
LightVision took Mark to White Sands National Monument, where he could personally experience the aura in the same way she trains her students.
This is a wonderful, wonderful place to come for the healing energy. It's also wonderful to meditate out here. And I brought my students out here because with the intensity of the sun against the sand, they can see what an aura looks like around their own reflection in the sand. And if you will come out and squint your eyes and look at your shadow, pretty soon the energy patterns and the colors that are in your aura will reflect around your shadow.
So how would I do that here? I mean, just right around my shadow here?
Yeah, and just squint your eyes and just keep staring and staring, and pretty soon you'll see the radiance around your shadow, and then the colors will begin to appear.
So the first thing that I see, it would be as though there were a brighter light around the shadow than even the sunlight out on the sand. Is that the beginning?
That's the beginning. And the more that you stare, you begin to see energy patterns and you begin to see light, and then the color begins to appear. Have you seen the color?
Well, I get, it's like, at first it's like color will appear and then disappear. Mm-hmm. So is that?
That's it.
Okay.
And your aura is a sea of undulating colors that move with your thoughts and your feelings, and everything. It's more or less a record of who you are and what you've experienced since you've lived on the planet. And it moves constantly. It's like a sea of energy, reflecting the beautiful colors and the rays, the oranges and the blues and the pinks and the yellows and the lavenders. And you have a constant color in your physical aura, in your mental aura, and in your spiritual aura. And that's where you get the stories of the colors, because as that moves and seethes, that energy, it generates different colors. And it speaks louder than anything that you can ever say with your mouth, because it reflects every emotion, thought, feeling, etc. that you may experience.
With a given individual, this energy is structured according to how that person is psychologically, how they are spiritually, and then how they are creatively. In other words, the choices they make, the beliefs they create, the ways they identify themselves, like their self-concept, that shapes it. And that governs how that energy is within their person.
There is work, a lot of work going on these days where people are learning how to tune into and work directly in the energy fields that are directly responsible or that seem to be directly related to the different physical systems. Those relationships have been known for thousands of years, or at least they've been written about.
You know, all the wonderful paintings of the saints, you can see the halos around their heads and hands and feet. That's, the artist was able to see the aura when he painted that around the saints and highly spiritually evolved people.
People who are clairvoyant, for example, will talk about seeing systems of energy around the body. And throughout history, people who have had profound spiritual experiences where all of a sudden they see the levels of energy around the body, or they see what's commonly called the aura.
in energy healing, which aura balancing is a kind of energy healing, there's a connection. Like, we normally have a sense of our space or boundaries and somebody else's space and boundaries, and treat it symbolically and abstractly as if, not really considering that maybe when somebody's too close and they feel too close and they feel in their space, they actually might be. That kind of thing. Or when we have a smooth rapport with someone, that there's actually something, energy connection, an energy connection going on. So really what happens in energy therapy or aura work is that there's a touching of the two realities energetically, not just energetically in terms of visual, light bouncing off of things, but energy connection in terms of energy coming out of someone. What's the feeling that's coming from them, and a connection so that there's not the same barrier. So there's an involvement that's really very intimate in some ways.
Ella Vivian explained to us how the aura affects our state of health and how distortions in this energy field can cause physical illnesses. She also talked about how the aura can be used in the healing process.
It gets out of balance and distorted by the experiences that we go through in life, the challenges we have to meet, the emotional traumas we go through, the physical traumas we go through. Say a man comes in and has had a very difficult time with his mother when he was growing up, that he felt like he was never loved by his mother, and that she was controlling and manipulating and dominating, and he was rebellious. That would create a distortion in his aura and in his own electromagnetic field. There are people who run their hands through the aura and they can feel that radiance in their hands, and they may perceive that as a block, and their hands may be their sight. I knew a man who worked entirely from the field that he got from his hands, running it through the aura. And then he would question, and then when he felt like that he had reached the seat of it or the bottom of it or whatever had caused it, then through a pattern of self-forgiveness, then that can be removed out of the aura, and then there would be no more block in the aura.
At one point, and I'll never forget this, at one point, this is a sweet old lady, man, right? I mean, this is a white-haired, this sweet grandmother. I mean, right? I mean, it's everybody's grandma. At one time in the balancing, it got so difficult for me that I started getting a little jive and started doing a little two-step like. And she smashed me on the shoulder, man. She hit me so fucking hard I couldn't believe it. She got my attention. And the whole balancing ended with a series of self-forgiveness, because she tied in some Bible stuff like the kingdom of heaven is within, and God lives within the kingdom of heaven, right? And then she'd tie in where Jesus says you're created in God's image. So if all of that is true, how can you be unworthy? So, you know, I'm doing a little dance like, you know, well, maybe I am okay. You know? And it was the first time in this lifetime when I started looking at the possibility that maybe I am okay. And I didn't understand the purpose of all this self-forgiveness stuff we were doing, but I went along with it because I didn't want to catch another rap in somewhere, you know. So, balancing is over. They carried me back to the house. For the first time in 3 months, I was able to get up and walk a little bit. You know, walk, you know. I cooked a spaghetti dinner that night. I gained 15 pounds. I didn't eat 15 pounds of spaghetti, but I gained 15 pounds.
That night, Billy?
That night. The next morning when I got on the scale, I weighed 116. I weighed 101 when I got there. And my normal weight's usually about 175. So I'm observing all this, you know. I mean, whatever happened, I didn't know what the hell happened, but whatever happened was working.
Aura balancers believe that the aura can actually become distorted or blocked or unbalanced by judgments we make about our life experiences, which in turn can cause physical illnesses or other manifestations. And at the core of these auric imbalances are feelings that lie deep within. Billy's auric healing session combined Ella Vivian's balancing of his energy field with his own self-forgiveness. allowing him to release the blocks in his aura that were perpetuating his disease. We asked Ella Vivian to explain how this idea of self-forgiveness became such a critical part of aura balancing.
We lectured before the Parapsychology Forum in New York, and in one of the hotels, and there would be, all the way from 300 to 500 people there. We're there that night, and we'd all given our talks, and here comes this little old lady, and she had on this gray knit shawl. She walked up to Dr. Hunter, and she says, "I need an appointment." And Dr. Hunter says, "Well, I'm sorry, but all the appointments are taken." She says, "Well, you eat lunch, don't you?" And Dr. Hunter said, "Yes." She says, "Well, I'll be there tomorrow. What time do you eat, 11 o'clock? And we said yes. And she had weeping ulcers on her legs. And she had to come over from New Jersey on the train. And so at 11 o'clock, here comes knock, knock on the door. We open up the door. Here she stands, and she's got this basket, and she has homemade bread and has made these tuna fish salad sandwiches, and she had fresh sweet squeezed carrot juice, and she had carrot cake. And Dr. Hunter had her come in and take off the stockings, which were soaked by that time, and had us go in and wash out the stockings and hang them up to dry. And we started working on her. And at the end of the hour, her stockings were dry, and she took her basket and she left. The next day, here she come, and she had her basket and all of her goodies, and we washed out her stockings. And Dr. Hunter usually come in at the end to check her out, and she looked up at her and she says, "Tomorrow you're going to heal me." So the next day, here she come. And we did do the same procedure, took her hose off and washed it. And she was on the table. And we'd done the pendulum work, and I looked up and down the hall, and here come Dr. Hunter. Had her pendulum in her hand. And she walked up, and she always put her hand on the body. That's how she got in tune with it. And she dropped her pendulum in the aura, and then she said, "Why do you hate God?" And this old lady says, "Why shouldn't I hate God?" She says, "He took my mother, and he took my father, he took all my brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, and I am left alone with these crying legs." And she was a nurse. And just at that moment, and I hate him, she says. And just at that moment, all those jackhammers stopped. And it was just like silence fell over that whole city. And then all at once she says, "Oh my God, what have I done to myself? What have I done to myself?" And she says, "Oh, Father, Mother God, I forgive myself. I forgive myself. I forgive myself." Dr. Hunter laid her pendulum down and walked out, and we go in and get her hose. And before she left, Dr. Hunter came back into the room, and she looked up at Dr. Hunter, and she says, "I knew you could do it." So that's how self-forgiveness come to be incorporated into the work.
It appears as though we've been given a cosmic delete button, which is forgiveness, so that we can literally erase or delete the judgments. So it's not uncommon in our work where people will bring up judgments that they have, that they may go back for years and years and years and years, and they release them. And instantly there's like a flood of well-being that comes through the system, a relief, a feeling of having let go of a heavy weight, that kind of thing. To me, that is truly the healing process.
I think I was about 36 when I met her, and had been drunk for 20 years because I couldn't stand the way I was, you know. So she was dealing with we were dealing with all of that dynamic, you know, all of that lack of worth stuff.
So Billy, give me an example of the kind of impact that this had on you in your life.
Within 6 months, I had my normal weight back, my strength back. The disease mysteriously disappeared, which to this day they don't know what the hell it was. They've got that blood sample of this new disease, you know, which went away. Nobody else got it. So it was an astonishing experience.
It's incredible the way that the energy will release out of that when someone says, I forgive myself. And they're forgiving themselves for creating it for themselves, for passing a judgment on themselves, for feeling guilty about whatever caused it. There's many, many implications in it. The person may even feel it in their physical body. They may have been carrying it for years and never known that they had an energy block, but when it's released and the energy flows back through again, they feel a lot better.
So through a series of self-forgiveness, I was able to take care of that. I didn't understand what they were doing, but it was working. I was feeling this incredible energy. I was feeling stronger than I had felt in a long, long time. Eventually, I worked into a position where I assisted Ella Vivian in the balance room once in a while by holding the light, which was very difficult for me because I wanted these people to get it so bad that I was sitting there going, you know, come on, forgive yourself, man, you know, and all that. And they were always telling me, man, to just knock that off, you know, just be neutral. Just hold that loving light and just let them do what they do. And I wanted them to do it, you know.
The concept of self-forgiveness is becoming more and more accepted in the field of psychology, at least as I'm seeing it today. The work of John Bradshaw around shame, they use forgiveness a lot. He recognizes it. And more I'm seeing psych books that are coming out that talk about the need for self-forgiveness as psychologically healthy.
In the development of the aura balancing, when they started, Dr. Hunter and L. Vivian Power and those folks that were developing that hit upon this idea of self-forgiveness. It was like the epiphany of human existence, in a sense. That's a good word. It's that moment that brings the meaning of life suddenly clear. It's like an epiphany. So the person's life is directed at realizing something larger of something that's hurt inside.
So if we can move our consciousness into the place where we really can move into acceptance and don't do judgment, just do evaluation, and we behave on the basis of the evaluation for the highest good of all concerned. But we don't make the person wrong. When we make them wrong, we go into the negativity.
Well, I had quite a cause about my work. But the clinic I worked in was an alternative women's feminist clinic, and it was anti-male. It wasn't just for women at the time. And the work I did as a midwife was definitely against what was going on in obstetrics at the time.
At one time in her life, Shiva Wilde was a 60s-style crusader, intent on changing the system. Her idealism and compassion for women in childbirth led her to become judgmental and antagonistic towards the medical establishment, other healthcare professionals, even God. Unaware of her anger, Shiva was hurting herself and her hopes of helping others. It was her unforgettable experience with Ella Vivian Power that put Shiva's life on a positive course.
Well, I can still see her the first time I saw her. That's how strong it was for me. I turned around in the sofa I was sitting on because I was being called into the aura balance room, and I turned around and there was this little, fat, white-haired lady wearing a chiffon scarf and a polyester suit, and I knew it was wrong. That wasn't, no, this is not what I came for. Nobody like that could help me. That was the rigidity of the way I saw things at the time. As soon as she started to speak to me, I was awestruck. And I don't remember the first words she said. It was maybe even a question, you know, like, well, tell me about what's going on in your life, or something pretty generic like that. And then she just pulled out her shotgun and pointed it at me figuratively, and you know, like held it right up with her hand on the trigger and said, "Why did you do that to yourself twice?" And then, you know, I didn't know what she was talking about. To me, I was just telling her about what was going on in my life and the challenges and the way people were wrong. And here she was asking me why I did that to myself. I didn't like it when you told me, but it was perfect the way it was. I didn't like it at all.
Well, the reason I did that was because I could touch into the anger that you had inside and how destructive it was to you personally.
Mm-hmm. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I knew she was asking me something really important. But in order for me to even respond to that question, I had to get bigger than I was, because there was no way to answer that question with the world the way I knew it.
And I know that when you came in to talk to me, you were filled with tears and compassion for women and what they had to do and go through in childbirth.
Yeah.
And I felt my heart go out to you because you were really emotionally suffering. But I also discovered that under that deep compassion for women, there was a deep anger toward God because He had programmed it this way. And I knew that for you to grow spiritually and in your soul, that you needed to accept the program the way it is in order to supply energy into changing it, and that you needed to change it in your consciousness.
I was responsible for every single thing in my life, in one way or another. I was responsible for it being there, and that there was actually a wisdom behind it. Not just that I was responsible and made a mess of things, but I was responsible with an intent behind it.
It's not that because you're evil this happens to you, it's because you separated from your loving, unloving things happen to you to bring the loving back into it. It's more that kind of relationship. It's, you have to resolve all this by being who you are.
What she did, though, was take that sense of accountability and go for the positive intent in it with me, so that I didn't have something to hold against myself. You know, I could have gone, oh no, I want to be a martyr. How disgusting, how embarrassing. Oh, I'll just die right here. That I can't live with that humiliation. But what she did was keep going to what my higher intention was with it.
And in your acceptance and in your forgiveness, then you've made great changes and great strides in your own soul growth.
Mm-hmm. The difference is remarkable, how it is not to fight what's going on.
It's like there's the act of holding this bad thing against myself. So if I forgive myself and I can really allow myself to feel that forgiveness come in, the most amazing thing will happen they will drop down deeper, and they'll drop into a place inside that is filled with love and compassion.
Billy Whalen and Shiva Wilde found that place inside that helped to heal their lives, one physically and one emotionally. Billy, cured of his illness, eventually founded a home for troubled children called Amigos de los Niños, Friends of the Children. Today, Shiva is a therapist and school counselor with a very positive outlook on life and people. Through aura balancing and self-forgiveness, Billy and Shiva were able to experience the effect that loving energy can have on healing.
So we would say that healing really is the application of loving to the parts inside or outside that hurt. If you think about it, if you set a broken arm, that's a very loving thing to do to that arm. And I'm suggesting that this idea of healing energy is really loving energy. And I'm not saying anything that really hasn't been said for thousands of years by people who talked about those things.
What it did for me was move into a greater compassion for myself for not knowing any better, for seeing that I was making the best choice I could at the time about something, or the best assessment even about it. And to forgive myself for not knowing better was such a tender and compassionate approach to myself that had nothing to do with being the fighter that I was before that time. Nothing to do with that. I was just very macho and nasty with myself, just so nasty. And self-forgiveness brought a much more softer and tender approach. And let me release those things much quicker.
If we can all learn to forgive ourselves and to forgive judgments that we've placed out, that one thing, to my way of thinking, would do more toward healing in all of these systems than any one single thing that I know of. It's also very challenging because most of us have not been brought up that way. We have been brought up to make people and things and situations wrong.
I can't make anything more important than loving myself. There's nothing I could do or say or any way I could be that could be bigger than my love for myself. If I do that, the consequence is really negative. But when I make my loving more important and override anything else, that's what self-forgiveness is. And I went back to work after that, absolutely changed, unqualifyingly changed in my approach to my work.
I had this dream of someday doing a children's home, and at that time, in running that saloon, I was drinking a bottle of VO a day. I weighed 250 pounds. I had all the material trappings that anybody could ever aspire to, and I was just dying. I mean, I was killing myself with booze. And it's just obviously clear to me today that if I hadn't met this woman, the home never would have happened. Nothing would have happened. I would have died. I would have either drank or drugged myself into the grave, or that disease I created would have killed me. So without her assistance, her intervention in my life, I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I mean, she had just this profound, profound effect on my life in me empowering me, I think is the bottom line.
Ella Vivian Power, from my point of view, has had a lot of impact on a lot of people. Vivian is the kind of person who I'd call almost a crusader.
The consistency over the last 19 years of observing this woman in a healing context, to me, is astonishing. You know, it's not like once in a while somebody gets better. You know, I mean, we're talking people fly from all over the world, you know, to come in and have a balancing from this woman.
I think that Viv's impact in the fields of health and the fields of psychology has been a substantial one. The way that ideas seem to disseminate is from individual people, and it's always been this way. Individual people go around and tell people about it, and then it spreads that way.
Ella Vivian's like squarely in that lineage of accepting a mantle, bringing it in, bringing it to the public interest, finding people who really catch on, nurturing those people who really catch on.
My greatest intention in the work that I do now as a therapist would be to continue to help people learn how they are making their lives the way they are, to forgive themselves for any judgment they have about the way that they've made it so far, and to have to realign with their own positive motive of growth, to keep creating what they really want in their lives, and to know that someone else cares.
Without people like Viv having gone out there 10, 15, 20 years ago to sort of spread the word and to talk to those people who are ready to hear it, I don't think that we would be ready to be doing the quality of work with the numbers of people that we're doing now.
And in all that, she continues to share her way of doing aura balancing, interesting people in it, helping them out, helping individual lives as part of the fulfillment of her life and her mission. But it's larger than that. She's not just another energy therapist, the way I see her. She holds this other kind of relationship to the development of culture, development of the United States, the development of the destiny of a nation into what its potential could bring about.
I think it's a response from the heart. I think there's a sounding board of truth within everybody that knows the truth. And what was it? Know the truth and it shall set you free. And I think all of us know when we're doing what we need to be doing and when we know we're not. It's been my experience that the more disciplined we are, the more obedient we are to the God within and the Spirit within and the inner voice, the more secure we become and the more centered we are and the more we're on course. And I think that each of us know from that real deep place within when we get off and we're not doing what we're destined to do, and when we're not fulfilling our own spiritual needs. If by one spark you can encourage somebody to be enthusiastic in life and in love and in joy and in fulfillment, it's a great service to mankind.
I had been waiting all my life for someone to talk to me like that. It's what I had wanted forever, for someone to be so essential in their communication with me that they would not have regard for my personality or the games I played or the pretenses that I brought. And boy, you know, I was just laden with pretense, but with a good heart. You know, obviously my intention must have been pretty clear. She wouldn't have been able to slash me to bits so well.
Well, in the balance room, I saw people with profound disease and sickness walk out of there healthy, only healing themselves. It's not like it was done to them.
Always remember this, that the individual is the healer. I'm there to love and support and maybe suggest. To assist the person in doing the work themselves.
Well, the difficulty I had, I remember this like it was yesterday, was I've been raised with victim and not take a lot of responsibility. And when you get sick, you're a victim, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the concept that maybe I had something to do with that illness was just
overwhelming.
It was. I mean, it was like you were talking to me in Greek or Martian or something.
Well, I remember that I asked you, are you responsible for the food you put in your mouth? And you said yes. Are you responsible for the roof over your head? Yes. Are you responsible for brushing your teeth every morning, taking care of your body, feeding it, etc.? And you said yes. And I said, well, where do you think your responsibility ends and then it's done unto you? And then you got the concept that you're responsible for the whole thing.
I wasn't real crazy about that.
No, no, you weren't. And we do create and promote and allow everything that happens to us, regardless of whether we know it or not, or if it's in our conscious awareness or not. And that's more or less exactly the same concept that we work with today. Releasing it out of the subconscious, becoming aware of the distortion against the capital T truth, and forgiving yourself and putting yourself back in tune with God.
She was doing counseling and working in people's energy fields 20, 30, maybe 40 years ago, I don't know. Long before it had the kind of acceptance that it has today. And she knew very, very, very well, way back then, of the importance of self-forgiveness, of the importance of releasing negativity from the system, and has been quite a courageous person, from my point of view, to travel around the way that she does and work with people.
I just love people. I just love God's creation. God's creation is humanity. In any way possible that I can serve God's creation in His loving, I need to do that. Everybody has something very important to say, and it's my job to listen. And it may be God giving me the greatest message I'll ever hear in my life. I was told in the very beginning that Earth is a schoolroom. And we go to school and we learn our lessons here. And our teacher says that there isn't any difference between soul and spirit, except that soul is inexperienced. So we come in here with the soul, and we gain experience by going through this schoolroom.
If you think about it, with respect to learning how to be loving and peaceful beings on this planet, we're kind of like that little kid who's just learning how to walk.
I would say that the pursuit of spirit within is the greatest mystery that's ever been written. And it's the greatest challenge, and it's the greatest satisfaction to solve that mystery of yourself.
Mark, you've met some very interesting people with amazing experiences. What conclusions did you come to about healing?
It was amazing to be out in the desert and to get some sense of the aura itself. In the big picture, the research by Dr. Ornish and the Simontons showed that the difference between the patient who regains health and one who does not is in part a matter of attitude towards the disease and believing in being able to influence it. Practitioners of aura balancing believe that when we make negative judgments, as opposed to evaluations, that this in turn creates distortions or contractions in our aura.
And they believe that this directly affects our health?
Well, physically, this restricts circulation, the nervous system, and other bodily processes, which in turn interferes with the rest of our health. They believe that these contractions also diminish our psychological and spiritual well-being. Aura balancing and self-forgiveness, it seems, allow us to release these judgments, regain a balanced energy field, and begin the process of healing.
So in other words, it's part of this whole being approach to healing.
That's it. Like Ron Hulnick said, heal the life, not just the symptoms.
And it seems that Ella Vivian has really committed her life to this healing of the whole person.
She's truly one of the healers. I asked her if she were standing in front of the pearly gates and St. Peter said he had one more test of faith for her before she could come in, what would she say?
Well, I'd say, St. Peter, I've passed all my tests. I had them when I lived on Earth. And I have one regret, that I didn't have a garage sale.